And we are live. What's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and I got to make sure I got the right room kicked in here. And we are live. Welcome to another edition of the Astro Weather. I'm your host, Robert Phoenix. I'll be breaking down the astrological, meteorological conditions for your everyday life. I can do a show like that and a voice like that. And today, our sponsor is True Hemp Science, brought to you by True Hemp Science, your one and only one-stop shop for all things CBD and more. We'll get back to them later in the show. How is everybody? Wow. It's a beautiful day. Sun is out. The sheep are out. The sheep are clearly out. The sheep are clearly out and about. The sheep are running the program only partially, but it's a beautiful day here. I hope everybody else is enjoying their morning, their Thursday morning. Here we are. It's Thursday, and we're creeping back into the weekend. We're creeping back into Friday, where it's a news dump day. Boy, Biden was in Israel yesterday, and I have a video clip I'm going to play on 15 minutes, which is just utterly embarrassing. It's utterly stupid and embarrassing, and if you're somebody who has any kind of buy into this country that I'm streaming from, it's demoralizing, right? Like, it is demoralizing to see this puppet go to Israel, where he's theoretically going to be engaged in some form of very high level global strategic maneuvering, quite possibly on the brink of an all out war. And we have President Potato, whoever that is. That's the other side of this whole thing. Anyway, he's going to be speaking tonight, and I think he's going to drop the war bomb. There is somebody in Congress who is ready to basically commit U.S. troops to Israel and the Middle East. And ladies and gentlemen, just like that, everything accelerates. We're going to look at that from the perspective of today's chart, and of course more, and how you can handle what is seemingly very dark energies on the horizon. What is the saying in working out weightlifting? No pain, no gain. Right? We're going to hold that space, the no pain, no gain space. Right? We're not going to be captives. We're not going to be held hostage, but we will not deny the fact that we're in a place right now that is deeply challenging on many levels. All right. Now, here's where I'm supposed to tell you to hit the like button, because yesterday I made it a point to encourage people to hit the like button, and what happened was fantastic. We got twice the number of likes yesterday. Usually you get around 245 likes, something like that. Yesterday we got close to 500 likes. And the reason why it's important is because it helps this show populate suggestions. So when you're on YouTube and they say, "Hey, how about this?" Right? It's really based on the algorithm. It's based on how many likes there are. It's based on how many views there are. So the more that we can get the likes up, the more that the algorithm will populate the suggestion stream, the more that we have the ability to get more eyeballs, and that's how we grow a channel. And it's not just how we grow a channel, it's how we can grow awareness. One of the interesting things that came out of this weekend with the absolutely great event, and I just want to thank everybody who attended for being a part of it, because it was really just a dynamite weekend and really special, was the fact that we were all, and it always blows me away, because we were all one consciousness. And yet you could go through that room and there may be similarities or touch points or nodes that certain people would share, but every single person in that room was an individual, right? For me, it is always the greatest expression of what Aquarianism is. You have this great group energy, and we're all one spirit, and yet we're very different, right? And if there's any gospel that I could preach, that would be the gospel, right? That we're all one spirit, but we're different, and yet those differences don't stand in the way of anybody else being authentically who they are, because that's what always happens. Nobody has to filter. Nobody has to um, put on a face. People cry, people laugh, people hug. People get pissed off. Well, I mean, not at each other, but kind of at the state of the world at times. So, I guess if there's a gospel to spread, this is it, right? This is it, that we're all one, and yet we are individually sovereign and unique in our expression. That's the message for the world. That is the message for the world, and not everybody can handle that. All right, so hit that like button, and let's spread this message a little bit. Okay, let's look at today. Well, we are really on the brink of it, aren't we? We are on the brink of things. We are encroaching upon the 11:59 mark. And here we go, right? There's that sun. Remember, we were talking about we're tracking the sun. And this is the sun square Pluto. So by the time we hit Friday, remember, that's tomorrow. It'll be at 26. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. Let me zoom in. It's almost at 26 right now. We'll call it 26. By Friday, by the end of the day, we'll be at 27. So we're Friday, Saturday, we're at the exact square with Sun Pluto. And that's probably where it's going to get hot. It's already hot, but it's where it's going to get hot. And will Israel enter Gaza? Absolutely. I don't think there's anything. Yesterday at the UN, which I'm not a huge fan of the UN, but the UN had a ceasefire resolution, and the United States vetoed it. The United States has veto power at the UN. So we vetoed as a country. Keep that in mind. We as a country vetoed a ceasefire resolution. That's right. It doesn't make me feel all that proud to be an American, to be honest with you. Because I'm a peace guy. I think we should be at peace. We should find more elevated, involved ways of relating with one another. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna roll over like a welcome mat. No, because you have to defend your right to have peace. That's the other side of the equation. A strong peace is only as good as the ability to make the other person aware, or the other entity aware, that if they cross the line, not only would there be no more peace, but there'd be no more pieces of them. I mean, that's how it works, boys and girls. And that's how everybody respects one another. It's like, okay, we're going to treat each other with respect, but you cross a line and you violate peace and sanctity, then you've crossed a line. So if we were to look at Israel's chart, right? If we were to look at Israel's chart, which I believe is 24 Libra. So the sun is right on Israel's ascendant right now, which means that sun conjuncting Israel's ascendant is squaring up against Pluto in their chart, right? Transiting Pluto in their chart. Today we have the ascendant at 29 Scorpio. I'm sorry, 29 Libra. That changes based on the time, so we're not really paying attention to that too much. But it's these squares. It's the Sun Pluto square. It's the Mars Pluto square. It is kind of the violation and the desecration of balance and harmony. So when we see the South Node here, it is in an inferior position to the true node in Aries, which is, and we're acting it out now, but not in, I would say, the most integrated way. Let's put it that way. So the true node in Aries, along with all of these other aspects, are unleashing the dogs of war. But what we're seeing, and this is what happens with the nodes, is what we're seeing is that there is a great imbalance, there is a great unfairness, there is a great disparity, right? The South Node will always show us that. On a collective level, that's what the South Node does. You go back and you look at where it was for the last 19 months in Scorpio. What did we see? We saw the sort of the manhole, the sewer open, and we saw all this corruption, Hunter Biden, and the laptop and the crack pipe, and all this deep rooted government corruption. It's not just government corruption. We saw some very dark sexual perversions that came up through that South Node in Scorpio. And we're just looking at this stuff. It's like, look at this. Look at what's on display. That's what the South Node does. It reveals. And I talked about this a long time ago, right? When we were going to move into this axis, that we were going to get into the sense of injustice, right? Injustice. And it basically means that the things that we think should be just and true and fairly adjudicated aren't. It also means that we are being shown imbalance. We're being shown the disparity between the one point of the scale and the other point of the scale. It doesn't always mean that it will be resolved, but we'll see it. All right. So what does that mean for you today on kind of a daily level? Well, we still have the moon in Sagittarius, but it's no longer in that T square that we had yesterday, that kind of adamant T square, the overzealous nature of the Sagittarian moon. But we do have the moon coming into square a bit more with Neptune today. Today, I think the motivation, the emotional motivation, is very, very deceptive. So and let's face it now, we're all moving together into a collective moment, right? Just like when we moved into COVID together, it was a collective moment. Now, as we slouch towards Bethlehem, second coming Yates, as we slouch towards Bethlehem, we are moving into a collective moment. So now our ideas, our emotions, our psyche are tied into what's going to happen on the world stage, or what's going to happen collectively with each of us. It doesn't mean that you can't have a personal experience, but it means that now we're being moved into that giant pool, the larger pool of experience. So it's interesting today with the moon Neptune square. And one of the things that I would suggest with this moon Neptune square, and again, the moon in Sagittarius wants to be authentic, right? We got the sun coming in, got a nice sextile there. Instincts in being are lined up. And I know that yesterday we talked about being sort of over the top, rigid, right? We had that moon square in Venus. We talked about that a lot yesterday. It was also in square with Saturn. So that energy's moved on a bit. Today, I would say be on the lookout for victimization. Don't allow yourself to be a victim, and don't put up with the victim mindset with other people, especially if you're a parent, especially if you're a mother with this moon Neptune square. Now it's going to get hard for kids. It's already challenging enough, right? I mean, look, we are going through a major paradigm shift. I was reading yesterday where Tyson Foods, the great chicken manufacturer with ties to China, is opening a cricket processing plant. Yeah, that's right. A cricket processing plant. So we're on the verge of this very dark paradigm shift, very dark. And people, if you're not aware of it by now, I mean, look around. It's happening. This is all designed to wipe the slate clean, right? A historical, technological, sociological, philosophical reset. Right? We are now in the phase where the deconstruction process of the reset is going to take on the look and face of war. So with the Moon Neptune square, uh, do not put up with victimization. Do not allow yourself to be manipulated into feeling like a victim. Right? That's the leakage with the Neptune Moon square. We got to look. You know what's right, right? With the Moon in Sagittarius, knows what's right, knows what's right, knows what's true, knows what's just. And the sextile with the Sun here, and the sextile with Mercury, which is right dot on the Sun, is indicative of understanding at an instinctual level that you know what to do. The challenge is the voice in our head and the critic and the judgment that comes along with the Moon Neptune square. So you're not a victim either. And the sextiles give us the opportunity to engage, right? Sextiles are engagement. You have to activate the sextile. So this is a big, big part of today. And if you're in another part of the world where it's much later and it's your evening, if you have a way to record your feelings or record your thoughts, write them down, clarify them, it can be very helpful before you go to sleep. Right? It doesn't even have to be, I don't know. It doesn't have to be a novel. You could write one paragraph. You could write a couple of sentences to clarify how you feel, what your position is. And Sagittarius has unerring faith. That is one of the key signatures of Sagittarius, the unerring faith that comes along with being quote unquote a true believer, right? Sagittarius is the sign of the true believer. And it's not necessarily bad. So as a strategy for the day, we all need to practice it. It's very important. We have Venus in Libra, excuse me, and it's moving out of the opposition, although mathematically it's still there with Saturn. So we have the Venus Saturn opposition, and again, that's a lot of formality. It's a lot of formality with Saturn Venus opposition. And in the workplace, it's the imposition of more duties, taking on more responsibility, all the stuff that goes along with it. The sextile with Mars here is nice. I like it. Again, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, right? Where this is going to be a very, very tricky time, right? I don't know if there's going to be a lot of lateral movement moving forward. When I say lateral movement, like, okay, well, I don't like this position or this job or this company. I'm going to go over here, leapfrog. And sometimes it's okay. Sometimes lateral movement can be really good. Just getting yourself out of a toxic situation that you're not into in terms of the workplace or what you're doing. Sometimes a change of scene is really, really good. So I'm going to use that as kind of a jumping off point here, because if you want to make a change of scene, you should probably think about doing it. And today would be one of those days where you put together your resume or you make calls, right? And I would urge as many people as possible to be more independent or interdependent with your work situation, because it's going to get more difficult. We're looking at a closure of hundreds of what is it? Is it CVS? I think it's CVS. Rite Aid's gone, right? So they're working at a closure of hundreds of CVS stores all around the country. We're looking at closures of Target. We're looking at closures of all these stores because of things like wanton theft. Like, it's just making it more and more difficult for them to be in business. So what's going to happen when those people lose their jobs? They're going to go back into the workforce. They're going to flood the workforce, and they're going to be looking for jobs. And I know that they're not the best jobs, but they're jobs and they serve a purpose. So I would get ahead of the curve if you haven't already and use this energy to be more independent with your work so that you're not always dependent upon the sword of Damocles hanging over your head. Feels very uncomfortable and not very empowering. So it's a good day to use that energy. We have a Neptune in conjunct with the sun. It's going to last for a couple days, right? It's going to last for a couple days. Again, those inconjuncts, man, they're tricky. They're really, really tricky. To me, this is very deceptive. Very deceptive. When we get into the collective energies, we go into the outer planets, right? So this is incredibly deceptive. And again, we're dealing with things like victims. Who did what? Who bombed what? What missile did they use? Where did it come from? And it's really hard. It is really, really hard. Mercury's there too, right? We're in the fog of war. We don't know. We don't know. There are people that are clamoring that Israel blew up the Christian hospital. I showed some videos yesterday. Looks like it was intact. There are other videos where it doesn't look like it's intact. People say it was a U.S. missile that did it. That was purchased by Israel or given to Israel, right? And then you have the people say, "Well, Hamas did that. They were firing it, misfired." We are in the fog of war, and they'll use anything to move the ball forward. And this is totally manipulative with this collective moment that we're in. It's completely manipulative. There are things today, and you better be aware of this one, with the Mercury Pluto square. There are things today and moving through the weekend, things that will be said that can never be retracted. Think about that. Things that will be said that can never be retracted. We're in a very precarious place. And that's even in your own life. So be very aware of what you say, because what you say could be the coup de grace for a relationship or somebody that's important or a situation that's important for you. The best part of the Mercury Pluto square is to dig down into your motivations, right? Try to understand why you feel a certain way. Try to understand why you have something in your brain that you need to get out. And with Libra, it's usually directed at another person. So there you go. There's your Astro Weather for today. We're in a tense and intense time. And when the sun goes into Scorpio, is it gonna get any lighter or brighter? No, it's not. We are shooting the rapids now. We're in the depths. But at least we're in it together. Don't forget to hit that like button, by the way. Okay. Let's talk about our True Hemp Science star of the day. Whoops, that's not what I want. Our True Hemp Science star of the day, or the star of the day brought to you by True Hemp Science, is none other than John Edward. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear for John Edward. Now, a lot of you are familiar with John Edward. He really rose to fame in like the 90s, late 90s, early, like he shot up into pre-internet fame, or like he's just before the internet blows up. And he started off as like a tarot reader. Like he would do readings at the Whole Life Expo or psychic fairs, like many of us have done. And he kind of catapulted from that place. And I think there's also something in his background with ballroom dancing or something that I think I remember that. But his claim to fame, right, is that he could communicate with people who had passed on. And, so he was this medium that could give people a lot of, relief or peace. And his chart is actually congruent with that to a certain extent. And I'm going to do my best to not be entirely critical of John Edward, because I think there's a there with this chart. What's interesting about him is that he's born on the same day as Sylvia Brown. And Sylvia Brown was a pretty well-known psychic, right? And I think her best fucking prediction was the COVID prediction, which was a long time ago. But I used to watch Sylvia Brown on these game shows, and it was like guessing something, right? I forget what the game show was, but she was terrible. I'm like, well, if you're a psychic, how come you're not doing better at this game? Right? I forget what the game was. It was like, I don't know, What's My Line or something like that, new version of it. So I really doubted Sylvia Brown's psychic abilities. And I kind of get that feeling with John Edward at times, but I'm going to tell you how he operates in a psychic space. So here we have the Pluto South Node conjunction. What is Pluto? It's the underworld. What is the South Node? It's the past. So guess what? He, in terms of his own identity, will go past life, right? He's done this before, right? He has a link to death. And with Virgo, it is about healing, right? It's right there. He's got that South Node on his midheaven, Pluto in the 10th house. He is known for listening to the dead or trying to hear the voices of the dead. Now down here, he's got the true node in Pisces. So in this lifetime, he's trying to get in touch with it in a psychic way. So he's actually kind of, in a weird way, he has unfinished business. I don't know what his unfinished business is. Maybe it's the fact that he allowed other people to die. You know, maybe on his watch, there's a bunch of people who suffered because he allowed people to die and he couldn't do anything about it. I'm just speculating a bit here, right? But that's kind of what it feels like. And then he's got all this Libra. And Libra, he's got Mercury, Uranus, and Venus. They're all up there also in the 10th house, right? So his communication with people is going to be different. Now, I can tell you that he does have some psychic gifts, but they're all based on kind of the Libra mindset, right? Like when you watch him, and I've often accused him, and others have as well, he's a cold reader. So cold readers are looking for clues. They're looking for clues from the people that they're sort of probing, right? He has that. That's part of his style. But it's also what Libra does. Libra initiates a conversation. So the psychic capacity for Libra here is air. It's not water. It's not this overwhelming sort of, the floodgates opening, right? It's not how it works with John Edward. So he's engaged in a conversation. Is he engaged with a conversation on the other side? Is he engaged with a conversation with people in the room who are connected? Well, of course he is, right? Of course he is. And what's interesting here is that because of the early degrees of all the Libra stuff, it trines his Capricorn moon. And that's not a moon that I would necessarily call psychic, right? The Capricorn moon is kind of more austere. It has a bit of an instinctual quality to it. But I would say here, it's probably helping him more in a business setting than anything else. And he's driven, right? He's got that Mars in Capricorn in the second house. The guy is driven. So I think he has some psychic awareness, but he's got to catch it, right? He's got to catch it like catching a beam of light or catching a current of air or an updraft, because he's dealing with Libra and air as a capacity to communicate. And he's got a Sun-Jupiter conjunction in the 11th house. So if you go back and look at where he was during the 1990s, like the late 90s, the 11th house was television. We didn't have the internet as blown out as it was back in the 1990s. So the 11th house as an entity has grown. started off as groups, organizations, friends, societies, things like that. But once we got into communication, radio, TV, that all became a very Aquarian medium, right? When you look at Aquarius, what do you see? You see the waves. And how did we receive signals? We still receive signals. Right now, I'm receiving a signal from my internet through the air, through the airwaves, right? So radio and TV became Aquarian mediums, right? It brought us together. We were having shared experiences with one another. Then eventually that morphed into the internet and being social media and online. So the 11th house has really evolved over time. And when you see his Sun Jupiter conjunction, he was an 11th house guy, right? Doing all these live events. And and there were times when I've seen him where it's like, oh man, this guy's fishing, right? But he's fishing for a reason, because that's how he's wired. And with Mercury Uranus, it's not always predictable. There are times where you get it, where it's kind of like lining up a radio signal back in the old days. You had to kind of like dial it in. Yeah, okay, there it is, right? That's how Mercury Uranus is. It doesn't always work, right? But when it works, it is like instantaneous and it's there. It's all now, right? So that's how he operates. And there are times when, if he is in, I don't know anything about what he's doing now, but there are times when, if he was in the right spirit or he had the right dial, right? You had the right, by the way, the South Node is on his sun. It's interesting that we're talking about him today, kind of resurrecting John Edward. I think when he's on and he doesn't have a lot of filters, or, he's just in the moment, he's probably really dialed in. When he's not on and he has to deal with critics or his own self-doubt, and even his own methodology, he's off. And that's where we get into these squares, right? And he's in conflict with himself. It's a very interesting chart, and not a lot of water for somebody who is theoretically psychic. Let's talk about Neptune on his ascendant. So his approach here is, again, theoretically going to be more intuitive. Like John Edward will be anybody who you want him to be. If you want him to be an angelic messenger from, that links this world with the next, he can be that, right? If you want him to be a super fraud and a grifter with Neptune on the ascendant, he could be that. That's how Neptune works. But his approach to everyday life is going to be Neptunian, where there's very little division between him and other people, and this kind of the thin veil that exists between us and everything else, whether it's this world or the next world. And his Neptune is pretty nicely aspected, to be honest with you. Here we go, comes in, and we have these sextiles with Venus and Pluto, right? Mercury is just kind of on the outer bounds of it, but because of all the alignment here with the other stellium that he's got in Libra, he's going to catch a bit of an updraft. So again, there's this kind of intuition. Remember how I said with sextiles, you have to activate them, you have to act into them. Well, that's what he's learning to do in this lifetime with that sextile. It's an interesting chart, and I think the hardest part of his chart is that Saturn over there in Taurus and the square to the moon. That has more to do with his family and ultimately even his relationship with women than anything else. And we got those inconjuncts going on. I think Saturn is the critic, right? Saturn is the critic that says, oh, this guy's a grifter. This guy's not psychic. And I think there are times when he's not, right? Because that's how Libra works. It's not always consistent. It's cardinal, but it's not always consistent. If you're off on one level or off on another level, it doesn't always work. But there are times in his chart where it does work. And and I think there's a reason why he has been successful in a lot of ways. That's my sense. But there's also a reason why he's had lots of critics and detractors, and you can see that in his chart as well. All right, there's your star of the day, brought to you by True Hemp Science. John Edwards. Speaking of True Hemp Science, let's talk about it for a minute here. True Hemp Science is your one-stop shop for everything CBD. You've got sleep gummies, which were the big. My mother takes sleep gummies. Takes them every night, helps her. She wakes up, she feels better. She's rested. Yeah, I take the sleep gummies. Plus, there's all kinds of other stuff in there that if you take it on a daily basis, there's a very good chance your health will see the results, your body will see the results, and your health will improve. Right. So go to truehempscience.com. And if you get $100 or more in terms of product, just type in 15MINS, 15MINS, and you will get free goodies with your order. $150 or more, get you free shipping. Oh, I froze up. Get you free shipping. And there's always a 30-day money back guarantee. Here you go. truehempscience.com. Don't forget, I have a link in the description for the show to buy me a cup of coffee. And everybody who's bought me a cup of coffee, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. I am not monetized on YouTube. I was demonetized a long time ago. And I'm not sure I'd ever want to be monetized by YouTube. Because if I was monetized by YouTube, I'd have to play by YouTube's rules. I kind of do anyway, but there's less rules that I have to adhere to. And I don't have to worry about whether or not my video is going to make it through monetization. Right. So you guys are great because I feel like you support me more than YouTube does. I'll leave it there. All right. I'll be over on 15 Minutes of Flame on Rumble at probably around 9:10 this morning. Just got to set up the show, set up the stream, and we'll get into it. We'll try to do our best to put our high beams on and see what's going on in the so-called Holy Land. In the meantime, use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart, to say what's possible. From me and the Astro Cat, who jumped on late, have yourself an absolutely fantastic day. And we'll see you back here tomorrow on the 11th house with my guest, Matt Prentice. It's going to be a great show. You don't want to miss it. All right, take care. Bye for now.